Hey guys, it's Danny. Today I thought we should have a Catasetum day. It is time to wake these guys up. Well, they're kind of waking up on their own from their slumber. It is time to pot them up. And I'm gonna show you the ones that I still have. There is some work I need to perform with them. There are some pseudobulbs which have some issues, but it's a good idea to actually film these stuff because these are some stuff which definitely can happen with Catasetum type orchids. They're very common. Might as well show you how I deal with all of these ailments that can affect them, and I'll tell you what the plan is this year for them. Because if you watched my recent video with orchids that I don't really enjoy all that much anymore because reasons, you already know that I have some pest issues with these guys. Luckily, they lose all of their leaves once a year and roots, so what you see here is normal. If you've never heard of Catasetums, yeah, it's okay. They should look like this after their dormancy. So with that said, let's just get to work. Before we do that though, don't forget to give this video a like if you end up enjoying it, and why not subscribe? I post multiple times a week. I'll also share with you in the description a tutorial on how to care for these guys. I was actually pretty good at it in my previous environment, in my home country. Here, not so much. But yeah, I'm working on it. Who do we start with? I don't know. Let's start with this guy. I received this one from a lovely subscriber. This is Fred Clarkera After Dark Black Pearl. This is supposed to be a black Catasetum type. By the way, I'm gonna call these guys Catasetums, but that's not necessarily correct. They have different names depending if they're hybrids or different varieties and so on. They're all Catasetum types, so I'm just, I'm gonna call them like that. As you can see, this one still has two pretty good looking pseudobulbs. You might say, but they're not good looking at all, they're bare. They're supposed to be like that. They are actually looking very, very nice. A little shriveling on the oldest bulb, that's okay. Soon enough, they will start to create new growth from the bottom. I have one which started, so I'll show you that. But at the end of autumn, typically, these guys will have yellow leaves, everything will fall, and when the leaves and sheaths are dry, you can actually remove these remains. It's a good idea to do so, especially if you have pest issues, because pests can hide in here. And in the end, when you unpot them, which is ideally to do again once a year because older roots don't hang on the plants way too long, when you repot them, when you pluck them from their pot, it is also a good idea to cut away all of the dead roots. Many of the times, all of the roots will be dead or almost dead. I choose to cut everything because most of the roots are gone anyway. So that's why it looks like this. And for a few months, depending on the variety and on the environment, they can look like this and do nothing. But then in the spring or close to spring or end of winter, again depends on the orchid, you will start to see growth at the base, a new pseudobulb forming. It is the best time to repot because there are no roots to damage and the orchid doesn't feel anything anyway. It doesn't feel it's been moved, repotted, disturbed in any way. So that's what we're gonna do today, even though not everybody is woken up. I'd rather do this now than later and potentially destroy some brand new root tips. So when it comes to potting media and pots and all of that for these orchids, there are so many ways of growing these guys. Whichever way you can think of, you can actually grow these guys. They are epiphytes, so you can grow them mounted if you have such an environment, or in baskets, in pots, whatever works best in your environment. However, what you should know about them is that they grow fast. They grow in 3 months or 4 months, an entire growth. So they drink a lot of water and they need a lot of fertilizer. So whatever setup you choose for these guys, oh no, the sun is going away. Okay, back to our story. So no matter what type of setup you have, you need to take into account the fact that you will need to water very frequent or make sure that the orchid is hydrated in a way or another. So for me, it's the typical bark and sphagnum moss. I did actually have these guys in self-watering in the past and it was okay. I didn't mind it. It worked well in my environment. So there are multiple ways to go about things. But just keep in mind, they can become a nuisance if you pot them in a non-water retentive medium or if you have them in baskets or mounted or things of the sort, especially in home conditions. They can be too much at the peak of their growth. So let's go ahead and put some sphagnum moss at the bottom, like I typically do. This will make sure that whatever water pulls at the bottom will be reabsorbed in the pot. So my sphagnum moss is already a little damp because it was compressed. I have to dampen it to decompress that block, and I'm going to be using it as it is. And you guys know I like to do the layering thing because this provides a very even moisture level in my pot. It works well in my climate, which is rather hot, rather dry in the summertime. Since these guys are heavy feeders, I do like to use slow release fertilizer. It actually helps, and I'm sorry about the varying degree of exposure in my videos, but the sky is very patchy, and if I keep constantly adjust the settings, it's just gonna be a mess. What did I tell you? This is Osmocote Pro High K. I do think I share it in the description. I typically have down below what I use regularly with my orchids. And because I have no roots, I'm just going to attach this guy to a little stake, a little bamboo skewer. It's my preferred stake. And yes, it does go dark and a little moldy for me as well, but it's absolutely fine. It's not affecting my orchids. And then lastly, the last layer of bark. Now, when it comes to the pot size, again, it doesn't really matter all that much, especially for me. I like to control what's inside the pot rather than the size. But since I will put these guys in a glass cabinet, I want them to be as tiny as possible. So I'm going for the tiniest pots, even though honestly, bigger pots would help me a little bit more with the whole watering situation. But in this case, space is a little bit more important at this point. And we're done. I will not water this guy. There is no need. There are no roots. Why would I water this medium when the roots will grow down and they will start to absorb water? So they will be about 7-8 centimeters or so. Then I will start to water it. Until then, there's no point. I'm just gonna degrade the medium faster than I should. So there we go. He is done. I'm gonna put him in a decorative container and we're gonna go together to the cabinet and I'll show you. So it's just that easy. Catasetum orchids are really easy plants to manage when they're dormant. When they're not dormant, they are large plants. These guys, they're set back like nothing else. They should be 3 times this size at the age they're at. Okay, this is Moniarara Millennium Magic Witchcraft, which is another black orchid. I have a video on her, check her down below. And because I do sometimes get this comment, why do I call some orchids her and others him? It's Latin grammar. In Latin-derived languages, it makes no sense. It's something that cannot be translated into my mother language. It doesn't even exist. So for us, nouns and pretty much anything have a gender, which determines the grammar, determines the adjective, and so on and so forth. And for me personally, to call a living thing, even if it's a plant, to call it an it, in my mind, it makes no sense. It's very bizarre. So I just feel weird. That's why this is a her, because she is a Moniarara. And Moniarara is a feminine noun in Romanian. Yeah, it might make no sense if you're an English speaker. Think of it this way: if it makes no sense to you to have genders for nouns, imagine how much sense it makes for us to have an it describing a noun. It doesn't go. I'll say something in Romanian for my Romanian viewers. Dă cu virgulă, you know? It just doesn't make sense. Anyway, so what I wanted to show you with this one is that we have a new growth. Can we see it right here? We might actually have 2. I see a little node maybe starting to swell here as well. These are definitely new growths. If this orchid would want to bloom, I suspect it would do so further up the pseudobulb, and it will not look like this. It would be a little bit rounder, maybe a little bit plumper than this. Flower spikes look a little bit different. And the reason for their setback, if you missed that video, is because they are pest magnets. They have very, very thin, papery leaves. And even though they do lose their leaves once a year, so you don't have to look at that ugly damage, it's important for the leaves to be in very good condition in the growing season, because the growing season is very short. It's like 3-4 months. And in that time, nothing bad needs to happen for the orchid not to be set back. And if it loses the leaves, it's not gonna photosynthesize, it's not gonna have energy to grow structures. So that's what happened. The pests kinda decimated the leaves, before the orchids got enough time to properly grow. That's why they're set back. Has nothing to do with roots or anything. This is absolutely normal for Catasetum types. Maybe not all of them will lose all of their roots, but typically most growers do tend to cut away all of the roots at the end of the dormancy because they just don't hang on. And you can have the bad luck of having older roots just die through the growing season, spoiling your medium, making a very acidic environment for the new roots. And that's not good because you're gonna have setback because of the new roots dying rather than the leaves, you know? So these guys are not hard to grow at all, but they have these little quirks that you need to consider. Every orchid has its soft spot. Ooh, maybe I should make an orchid care for beginners episode in which I will tell you about the soft spots of most of these orchids and what you should pay really, really close attention to, because as invincible, let's say, as Phalaenopsis might be overall, they have their soft spots. And if you have the bad luck to be prone to having some sort of issue with a soft spot, then you will probably consider Phalaenopsis very hard to grow. But if I tell you about these soft spots, maybe there's a way in which you can avoid them, right? I think that's a good topic for an orchid care for beginners episode, right? All right, so I will try to place this orchid somewhat to the side, having more space for the new growth. To be honest, I don't know how big the new pseudobulbs will be, hopefully bigger. They can get pretty plump, so it's a good idea to leave space, particularly because this pot is tiny. It's a little tiny, but you know, I have very limited space for them where I want to keep them. All right, so one of the, let's say, more common ailments with Catasetum type orchids is pseudobulb rot, particularly if you water them a little bit too much while they're entering dormancy, or you have a lot of humidity or dew or things of the sorts, or you get rain on them. I did that in the past. So I'll show you a close-up of this guy. You can see that the base of the pseudobulb here looks a little bit weird. It looks like it's pinched in. Well, that's because it's rotting. It has an infection here. Now, the best thing to do is to actually cut away this section. I know, it sounds a little horrific, but we did it in the past. Actually, I think I have a video. Check it down below. That was successful because new growth can sprout from anywhere from these nodes. It doesn't necessarily have to sprout from the base. I do see there is a node here, but sadly, it will have to be removed because this infection will go up. So I have here a scalpel, I think, let's call it like that. This was something Repot sent me, so it's PR. They don't have this particular model, they have a different one. This was supposed to be a one-time use one. I have it for 3 or 4 years at this point, 3 years or so. I'm still using it, it's very, very good. It's very useful with orchids and plants in general. So what I will do is cut the base of the pseudobulb way above this infected area. So I think somewhere here. And let's take a look and see if we have issues. No. If I would have had anything blackened in this section, I would have had to cut again. I show a lot more instances of this in that video. I'll show you an infection that actually went further up and how I dealt with that. If you're interested, you can see that video. Now though, we are good. And I'll try to cut lower. I'll show you the infection. So I'm gonna seal this with a little bit of cinnamon. This is ground cinnamon that you can find at the supermarket. It's gonna help out. It's gonna create a bit of a seal here because this is wet. It's going to get covered with cinnamon powder and it's gonna create a sort of a crust as the cinnamon gets a little bit wet and then dries. Now, somebody told me in the past that, I don't know whoever said, that cinnamon repels water, so it's kind of useless in the way we use it. And yeah, cinnamon initially does repel water because it is ground bark. But you don't mean to tell me that wood and bark in general never gets wet and never gets soaked, do you? Because I have some wood in my aquariums that will disagree. So it's the same thing with cinnamon. If you insist, or the longer you expose the cinnamon dust to water, gradually it will start to get wet and actually inflate, absorb some of that water. And that's kind of what happens when you cut tissue. It sticks to the wet part and initially, yeah, it doesn't do anything, but then as it sits there, and you will notice, particularly if you have a much wetter tissue, it will start to change color. It will become a little bit darker. It's starting to absorb the water and actually get a little bit swollen, let's say. It's retaining a a little bit of that water in its structures. Because this is wood. Cinnamon is grounded bark, pretty much. It acts the same way as this bark. Yeah, you pour water on it, it's not going to penetrate inside the structures, but if you soak this, it's gonna get wet. Now this, I'm not actually going to pot. I'm gonna sit it on a bit of, I don't know, sphagnum moss or bark or something. We'll see which eye wants to develop, and then we're gonna go ahead and pot it. Again, I did this in that video that I will link you down below, and it worked out great. Now let me just show you how the infection looks like. I'm gonna do a cutting. Do you see the darkness here? Yeah, that's not supposed to be there. And this would have went up if I let it. So that's why it's a good idea to remove anything that is dark and blackened on these pseudobulbs. It's a very common occurrence with Catasetum orchids, right? So this one, we'll put him to the side. I'm not gonna pot him. The older bulb has some issues. I think it has some rot further up. This is an old pseudobulb, but it's mushy. I feel it. I don't think this is good anymore. So I actually removed this pseudobulb from this older bulb. I think I need to throw this away. I don't think it's good anymore. This guy will have to wait. I'm not gonna pot him in anyway. The other ones look pretty okay. There is another one that has some issues. This guy, we have an issue here. Do you see that the older pseudobulb, if you would focus, please. Do you see it's yellow? Yeah, look what happens when I try to move it. Look how flexible it is. This guy is not okay. It's not rotting, but I think the pseudobulb is not all that good anymore. So with this one, what I will do is completely separate this newer pseudobulb from the older one. I'm just gonna cut it. The rhizome is actually pretty dry. All right, so there's no chance for this one to survive. This is the Jumbo Delight Diamond. Monierara Jumbo Delight Diamond. Oh, I forgot I had this one. This is a newer one. Obviously, a tiny little pseudobulb like this will not sprout a super big growth, so I can save some space. Let's find a tinier pot. Alrighty, found a very tiny pot. This is a 3-incher from Repot Me. Again, they sent it to me for free as part of PR. And if you're wondering why I always mention this, I have to. I'm obligated. Whenever I receive stuff from brands for free, I have to mention that I didn't purchase it. This video is not sponsored, but I have to mention it. It can get a little annoying, I know, but I don't want to be fined. Same thing with this little pseudobulb as well. A good thing about Catasetum orchids is that they don't suffer from a lot of setback, even if you try to propagate them through back bulbs and you divide one single bulb. So some of you already know that in order to make a proper division with orchids, in order to have a division that will take off and will grow normally, it's usually safe to split 3 pseudobulbs per division. With Catasetums, these rules don't apply. They can actually perform great only from 1 pseudobulb, provided that pseudobulb is mature and it's not already set back. This is set back, so I'm not expecting a super huge growth from this one. But typically, if you have Catasetums and you want to propagate them, you can definitely do so with back bulbs. You don't have to split 3 bulbs. You can only split 1, and the setback will not be major at all, if at all. Pretty undetectable. So again, a little bit of slow release fertilizer. I guess I should center it because I don't know where the new growth will decide to sprout. He's still sleeping, but it's okay. So I'm gonna center it. Ooh, I can use one of these. This is the top of the skewer that I already used. Perfect. And by the way, one thing I didn't mention is that Catasetum orchids in their dormancy, they don't even need light. So you don't have to keep these on the shelves. There are some people who pretty much strip the pseudobulbs from leaves and roots and all of that, put them in a box and just hide it away somewhere. Don't keep them in very, very cold conditions. They're warm growers. They don't need cool downs in this dormancy period. Keep them, let's say, in the same room with your other orchids, but if you want to just shove them in a box and not see them for a while, you can do that. You might not necessarily want to do that, but if you really wanted to, you could, which is funny. Just check on them from time to time because some of them wake up earlier than others. Sometimes they don't even take much of a dormancy at all, and my Monierara doesn't typically sleep too much. So yeah, just check up on them. All right, so this guy is done. Where's your tag? There we go. Need to find a decorative pot for him as well. We're done. Right, so let me show you where I'm going to keep them from now on, and hopefully we're not gonna have pest issues all that much. We'll see, hopefully, because I can't handle another year of pests with these guys. All right, so this is where we're at. This is the bottom shelf, let's say, in my Millsville cabinet. I made I made some room in this shelf. And you might say, oh, well, that's enough space. Well, I don't know about that. Catasetums usually grow pretty large. Imagine each cane or each pseudobulb has leaves on each side, and the leaves can be 30 centimeters long. So 30 centimeters like this, 30 centimeters like that. That's a whole lot of catasetum. I don't think these guys will be this big this year because they're set back, but they can definitely be that large. They can also grow quite tall, so don't know if this is enough, but it's what I got for now. Hopefully it's gonna be okay this year. We'll see next year. All that I wish this year is that I don't have the thrips finding them so fast. Don't laugh, it's not a laughing matter, please. It's also pretty hard to spray these guys with anything pretty much because as they grow, they have that funnel-shaped crown. So if I'm not careful with water and it doesn't evaporate in time, I can definitely rot the new growth, which happened in the previous years as I was trying to treat them. Yeah, it happened, especially with the water-based solution. So that's pretty much out of the question, but also the leaves are just so thin and the cuticle is so thin or inexistent that the oil is absorbed right away. It doesn't sit on the leaves like you see with these cattleyas or dendrobiums. Do you see that shine on the top of the leaf? Yeah, that's the cuticle. If I put a layer of oil here, it's gonna sit here. It's not gonna get absorbed. Well, catasetums don't have that. Their leaves are not glossy. They're not shiny. They're papery and very absorbent, just like paper. You put a layer of oil, horticultural oil, vegetable oil, neem oil, whatever oil you can think of. If you put it on the leaf, it's gonna get absorbed, so you have to put very, very little. And it's not gonna hang on the leaf surface, so it's not going to act on the thrips or whatever insects for long. It's just gonna be then and there, and it's not gonna hang on for potential future thrips that might wander in or on the leaves. So that sucks. They're kind of really hard to manage when it comes to pests, but anyway, I'm hopeful this year that pests will not find them very fast. But yeah, we'll see about that because they're beautiful orchids. They're easy to grow if you're a little careful and if you don't have too many pest issues. But anyway, that's about it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching and hanging out with me and hearing me blab. How are you guys doing with your catasetums if you grow them? Do you have success? Do you like them? Let me know, and I will keep you up to date with mine. Alrighty, so if you want to follow me on Instagram and Facebook, you can do so by searching for me. I'm at MissOrchidGirl, but the best thing to do is to subscribe to my YouTube channel because this is where I post regularly, multiple times a week. All sorts of plant content, specifically orchids, but other plants as well. Alrighty, so with that said, hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next time. Bye!